In my last video, I did my predictions for how teams would stack up and finish out the season 1 through 15 in the Eastern Conference. Feel free to check out the video if you missed it. And of course, I said I would follow it up with a video on the Western Conference, a conference in my opinion is much harder to project than in the East. A stacked conference where teams are going to be neck and neck fighting for playoff positioning throughout the year, so it's very possible I could be wildly off in ranking these teams 1 through 15, but we'll revisit in April and see where I got things right and wrong. And I would love to hear your guys' Western Conference predictions in the comments as well. As always, if you're new to the channel, you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video. Now for me, who finishes first in the West is pretty easy. When you take a team that finished first in the West last season, even though it ended up being a different story in the playoffs, but you take a team that is now a year older with more experience, and you also add Alex Caruso, one of the best defenders in the game, a player that has such great impact when he's on the court, and you also add Isaiah Hartenstein, who I still have said before is one of the more underrated bigs in the game with his ability to protect the rim, crash the boards, and get second chance points. This team is absolutely stacked and primed for a strong return to title contention in this upcoming season. Yeah, they lost Josh Giddey in the Caruso trade, but let's be real, this is an upgrade in the immediate term anyway for the Thunder when they really already have a primary ball handler and a top 5 player in the league in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Adding Caruso gives them a more well-rounded roster with elite perimeter defense. They're going to be the best defensive team in the league hands down. When it comes to a postseason run for the Thunder, I still have my doubts, mainly because they're still a young team, but finishing at the top of the Western Conference, assuming no major health issues, is almost a foregone conclusion at this point. At number 2, this is where the Denver Nuggets finished last season, and I was inclined to put them here again, but I think even similar to last year, they're going to take the regular season a little slow, knowing that it's a grind, a marathon, not a sprint. After a disappointing loss in the postseason last year, I can see them conserving more of their energy for the playoffs and resting guys throughout the season. I also think letting KCP walk in free agency is going to be a big loss for them, but we'll discuss that when we get to the Nuggets. Instead, at number 2, I've actually got the Dallas Mavericks. A bit controversial here, especially for a team that finished 5th last season, but this is also a team that went to the finals last year. I don't think adding Klay Thompson is going to improve their play that much and get them over the hump in actually winning a championship, and Klay is pretty washed as a player, but adding veteran leadership, championship experience, and a guy who can play off the ball to help spread the floor more for Luka and Kyrie and making drives to the paint is going to make them more deadly on offense. Lively, another year of experience under his belt, is going to help as well. I still really like the pickups they got at the deadline last year in PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and now these guys will have a full training camp with the team to mesh and gel together with the roster. So yeah, while some might think it's a stretch to put them as that high, I don't think it's out of the question. Third, this is where I have the Nuggets. Losing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is going to impact their overall defense and floor spacing on offense, but they still have the best player in the world. They've still got one of the better guards in the game in Jamal Murray. They added some veterans in Dario Saric and Westbrook. In my view, they still have one of the best coaches in the league, so they're still going to be a very good team, a top team in the Western Conference, and I do think the Nuggets are going to come back with a vengeance after they were unable to defend their title. And number 4, this is where I have the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Wolves finished 3rd in the West last year and just narrowly by 1 game behind the Nuggets. While I still think the Wolves are going to be a very good team because Anthony Edwards is really starting to enter his prime and blossoming into a superstar, I'm still not sold on the trade for Karl-Anthony Towns. And this is coming from someone who is not a big Cat fan and was never really high on him as a player to really take the Timberwolves to the next level, but Cat is still a better player than Julius Randle. And even though I like the addition of Dante DiVincenzo and I think he'll be a great role player for them as a shooter off the bench, I just don't think the Wolves really upgraded their roster with this trade. And when you finish 3rd in the West, go to the conference finals, and knock off the defending champions, you have one of the brightest young stars. You made an all-in move to get Rudy Gobert. Your sole focus right now needs to be on upgrading and getting better. And I just don't think that was the move. I get it, they had to do it for financial reasons because Cat's long-term max deal was going to hamstring them for the future, but in the immediate term, just looking at this upcoming season and predicting how they will fare against the rest of the West, I don't see it being a situation where they walked away and they were better than they were before. 5th, this is where I have the Phoenix Suns. Ironically, this is where I had them last year in my preseason prediction video, and they ultimately ended up finishing 6th, mainly due to a poor start to the season. I expect something similar for the Suns as well, in the sense that it's an older veteran team. They know their window to win a championship is so small with Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal getting older and having no draft capital for the future, they're going to take the regular season easy and focus more on the playoffs. And I also wouldn't be surprised if Beal and KD miss a fair amount of time, or just having other injuries to the team in general. They're still going to be a good team, of course. They still have 3 star-level players on their roster, but I don't see them getting into the top 4 to secure home court advantage in the postseason. 6th, I'm going to go with the Kings here. I think we're going to see a bounce-back season from the Sacramento Kings after a disappointing year where they missed the playoffs. Adding DeMar DeRozan is going to be a big win for them when it comes to having that cool, calming veteran presence, especially when it comes to closing out games. They've got their great duo in Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox, who are still in their primes. I think their offense is going to be run much more efficiently and effectively. I do have concerns with their defense, but I do expect their overall play will be better than we saw last year. 7th, I've got the Pelicans. I'm not really sure where the Pelicans go from here. They won 49 games last year, squeaked into the playoffs as the 8th seed, got eliminated in the first round. They've got a lot of talent between Zion, Ingram, McCollum, and now they also added DeJounte Murray in that trade, who I think will be a much better fit with this group than he did in Atlanta. And who knows, maybe DeJounte Murray is just that piece to really get them to the next level. But I don't see it. I don't see them really exceeding expectations and beating out their competition in the West. I don't see Ingram being as engaged and committed this season to the team, knowing he was involved in trade rumors throughout the year and in the offseason, knowing that he's going into this season on an expiring contract and unlikely to reach an agreement on an extension because he wants a max deal and the Pelicans don't want to give it to him. I could just see this not really playing out well for the Pelicans, especially after making a big move and mortgaging some of their future to get Murray. 8th, I've got the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies, they're going to be better than they were last season, obviously, considering they were without Ja Morant most of the last season between the suspension and the injury. Desmond Bane missed significant time, as did Marcus Smart. Even Jaren Jackson Jr. missed some time as well. These guys are going to come back healthy. They're going to be better, but I still have my doubts about this team when it comes to having the pieces to really put them at the top of the West. I definitely think they'll get back to the playoffs, but as one of the lower seeds and likely a first-round exit. 9th, I've got the LA Lakers here. Look, I think the Lakers will be slightly better under new head coach JJ Redick. I don't think Darvin Ham was a good coach, but let's be real. The issue here with this team has been their roster construction, and they really did nothing to improve or fix it in the offseason. 0 free agency signings, missing out on some big names between free agents or players that were available on the trade market that would ultimately be dealt to other teams. They re-signed soon-to-be 40-year-old LeBron James to a max extension. They were a mid-team on both offense and defense last year, so yeah, I just don't see how you can put the Lakers any higher from what we saw last season. JJ Redick alone isn't suddenly turning this thing completely around. 10th, this is where I have the Clippers. It's funny because the Clippers last season is a team I was very high on in my preseason prediction video. I had them finishing 2nd in the West. And now this is quite possibly the lowest I've ever been on this team. Losing Paul George is obvious. That's going to hurt them big time when it comes to really being able to compete with the best of the best. But Kawhi Leonard, yet again, just cannot stay healthy. It's been reported that he may not be available to start this season. Kawhi is 33 now, with a mountain of injury issues that he's had throughout his career. I don't know how you expect him to suddenly start being healthy and available to play. They extended James Harden, who's 35, don't get me wrong, can still ball, but obviously not the same player that he used to be. They're the oldest team in the league. They have little to no depth when you look at their roster top to bottom. I honestly would not be shocked if the Clippers missed the playoffs. And that's honestly more just a testament to how competitive the West is right now. 11th, I've got the Warriors. Yes, missing out on the play-in. Last year in my predictions video, I had the Warriors finishing 9th and got crucified in the comments for having the Warriors that low. And then they ultimately finished 10th. But this team, their age, roster construction, they just aren't that good anymore. Steph is still Steph. He's still one of the best players in the league. Yeah, they've got some nice young pieces with Kuminga and Podziemski. I actually like the Buddy Hield signing. I talked about that, how I thought it was one of the more underrated signings from this offseason and a great fit for the Warriors. But outside of that, what else does this team really have going for them where you can definitively say they're going to be better than last season? Draymond is still a loose cannon who is going to get suspended throughout the season and is also declining in play. Wiggins has somehow forgotten how to play basketball and no team will touch his contract in a trade. They still don't have a proper starting center and are trying to play small ball like they did in 2015 as if these guys are still in their mid-20s. Yeah, I just don't see the Warriors being any better than a play-in team at best. 12th, and honestly, this is why predicting the West is so hard because I've got the Houston Rockets, which is tough because I actually think they're going to be decent next season, assuming Şengün comes back healthy. But I just can't quite put them above the 11 teams that I just mentioned ahead of them. Still a little too young. They're still trying to figure things out and how to mesh offensively. I like what they're doing in terms of what they're building for the future, having some of these veteran players to also help guide the youth movement, but I just don't think they're quite there yet. At 13, I've got the Spurs, who I think will be better than last season, with Wemby now having a season of experience under his belt. Adding Chris Paul is going to help more than people think when it comes to the development and mentoring of their young players. I like their draft pick in Stephon Castle, and bringing in Chris Paul to mentor him also for the future. The Spurs are going to be a great team in the distant future, but they still have a long ways to go in developing their talent to get back to a place of contention. After that, at 14, I've got the Jazz. This is probably a lot lower than most people have them, but in looking at the Western Conference from top to bottom, I just don't know where else you can put this team when you stack them up against their competition. They've got Lauri Markkanen, who they cannot trade for the entirety of the season based on when he signed his max contract extension, which I think, again, was a mistake. They could have extracted maximum value for him in the form of a trade at his previous deal. And yes, they have some nice young pieces. I also like their draft selections in Cody Williams and getting Isaiah Collier late in the first round, but they're not going to be a great team. I see them towards the bottom of the Western Conference. And then finally, I've got the Blazers finishing last in the West. They're going to continue on their rebuild. They're going to join the tank for flag sweepstakes. I wouldn't be surprised if they try and move Anthony Simons to put them in an even better position to get that #1 pick. I could see them trying to trade Jeremy Grant if some team is willing to take on his contract. Hell, they might even try and trade DeAndre Ayton. I can just see this being a team that, well, one, isn't going to be very good, but will double down and go on a fire sale before the deadline to try and extract even more future assets for players on their team that don't fit their long-term plan. So there you have it, my predictions for the Western Conference standings. Let me know where you guys agree or disagree. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.